every single song that's been sung, all the words that are spoken, I keep sitting here and I'm thinking, oh, that's what I want to say. No, that's what I want to say. No, I think I'll just speak about that. Because every one of these messages just keeps taking us back to the same place that there at the end when Ramurti was reading in Swamiji's letter to us, just describe the dilemma that we face. Swami writes in the commentary on the resurrection of Jesus that even though we are so magnetized by this image of expanding light and this image of courage and the possibility that no matter what we're experiencing, it will be remade and resurrected in divinity. Still, we can't really imagine what that means. Swami puts it in such blunt terms. We think only in terms of this mess of pottage, which is not a phrase that we normally sort of talk about to one another. A mess of pottage says all sorts of things to us, and it's not really how we want to think about our lives. So we can only imagine it will shift a little because there'll be a new flavor. That's what Swamiji says. In other words, I'm suffering a little now, but maybe I will get that job. And the house is disrupted because we're remodeling the kitchen, but yes, it'll be finished. And my son is having a little trouble finding employment, but he will find a job. That's how we think of it, isn't it? We think that somehow God will help us just shift this a little bit because I'm suffering in this way and now I want it to be different. The disciples of Jesus were no different. Their imagination, their expectation of how the story of Jesus' life would end. And I dare say none of them, unless he had transferred to them by superconscious intuition a picture of what was really going to happen, could even have imagined it. Here he was, this great master clearly, the predicted Messiah. They had seen his miracle power, they had felt his love, and their natural thought would be that somehow in the context of what I already know, he'll make it better. And the biggest challenge that we all face spiritually is really a very simple one. We lack imagination. On the wall here we have quotations from Yogananda's poetic description of cosmic consciousness. Enjoyable beyond imagination of expectancy. And of course, just quite apart from the wordsmith admiring the beautiful use of language, beyond imagination of expectancy. Now the challenge for us always is to get in tune with an entirely different vibration. Everything in creation is a manifestation of the divine word. In the Gospel of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and Jesus was the Word, and the power of the Spirit was the Word. And what they're speaking of symbolically is the Om vibration that Yogananda speaks of directly. And all the music that we listen to, the extraordinary power of all that music, it's not merely that the words are meaningful, the melodies are uplifting, but it actually vibrates at a certain frequency with a certain consciousness that when we hear it said, "Rise, O my soul, in freedom," it isn't just, oh, maybe we will, but we actually feel somewhere in us the soul is rising in freedom. And then we proclaim, nothing to fear anymore. Now just even for a moment, imagine what that would be. I mean, all of us, and I put myself right with everyone, all of us live with so much subconscious tension that we don't even think of it as unusual. We don't even imagine that there's an option to it. We just try to flavor the mess of pottage with something a little more attractive. right? But then we actually sing, "Rise, O my soul, in freedom, nothing to fear anymore." And then we sing about the resurrection of Jesus. "In thy light, even so are we, lifted, transformed." And so we have every year, and we think about it in between too, this extraordinary story of Jesus. And that the story, by its sheer drama, just exemplifies beyond imagination of expectancy every little experience that we're always going through every day. Every day is just this cycle, isn't it? Of, oh, I hope it works out. Oh, good, it wasn't so bad. Oh, this was going to be terrible, but at least now it's behind me, and maybe this will happen, and maybe that'll happen. We don't even know there's an option. And so we have the story of Jesus where you have this extraordinary cycle that we go through, where this being of light, with wisdom and power and a glory in his aura that those who have eyes to see and ears to hear can feel. And we have Jesus walking through the land of the Israelites, through the people he has come to serve. And a man meets him on the beach, and instantly his life becomes something completely unanticipated, because he's utterly magnetized to this force of divine light. Now, why would he be drawn? Why would the women be completely transformed? Why would Mary of Magdalene put aside an entire life and become someone completely new? It's not merely because she's looking at him, in the way that we look at celebrities now and we think that they're so interesting and they think that they're so interesting, and they walk around and we see pictures of them and we're also staring at them, and what is she wearing and how is her hair, and all that has nothing to do with us, but is just a projection outside of something we imagine that should be attractive or would be attractive. But we don't turn our lives completely over. If such a person says, "Follow me," we don't drop everything that we've always been and go in that direction. Because what Jesus brings, is he brings our own self to us. You see, that's the extraordinary part of it. He doesn't bring himself, he brings us. He brings us to our own remembrance. There's an extraordinary word in Sanskrit, which is one of my favorite words. The word is smriti. It has a nice sound to it. I like it. Smriti is what it means. And it describes, the word for that, what it means is memory, remembrance. And smriti is what the saint awakens in us. It's what the master awakens in us. It's all of a sudden we realize, in the company of that complete freedom, oh, that's who I am. And that's why we can suddenly drop everything that seemed important to us and walk away from the world and join the monastery, walk away from the livelihood and follow the master, walk away from temptation and that which we used to consider pleasurable, and live a life that all our friends think is so austere. Why are you not coming out with us to drink anymore? What's happened to you? You used to be such a good guy, But it doesn't even feel like renunciation. In Autobiography of a Yogi, there's this story of the levitating saint, I think it is, who had inherited a large fortune, and then he just gave that fortune away and became a renunciate, a devotee of God. And people say to him, "Oh, you gave up so much." And he just looks so puzzled. And he sort of goes like this, "A handful of rupees," he said, "for an eternity of bliss." And then he says, worldly people are the true renunciates. They're turning their backs on their true reality and clinging to that which is just going to be taken away from us. But no one can make you understand that. I mean, even there's no point even in pleading with you to understand it. Because when we know, we know. And these masters come because their vibration through the ether, through time and space, through the stories of their lives, it rings that note so powerfully that something deep within us hears it. We literally awake. That's why that word is used so often. Awaken us in thy light. Help me to see. So Mary Magdalene, as the story is told, the night, the Friday before the first day of the week, Jesus is taken through this, such a dramatic story. He goes triumphantly on Palm Sunday into Jerusalem. A week ago, in this very church, we're singing, "Sing out, Hosanna, here the Son of David, the King is coming." And the story is told how people spontaneously just recognized him and took off their cloaks and laid them on the ground and stripped branches off the trees to honor him. And all those who had been following Jesus all this time, this is who they knew him to be. But he'd been controversial and denied by many and kept his light hidden. But all of a sudden, on this one day, he's coming in the way that they feel he should be honored. And their expectation naturally is that it will go on in this way. The story of the life of Christ mimics exactly the life that we always go through. Isn't it so? Oh, now I've met my true love. Now finally I have the baby that I always wanted. This job is just perfect. Look at how beautifully the kitchen came out. And now we say, this is how it was supposed to be, isn't it? This is how I always knew it was going to be. And we even say, this is how God always wanted me to live. That's my favorite. Right? It's exactly the way I always wanted it. And of course, that's what God wanted for me, didn't he? Like this. Right? And then we grab it. Because it makes sense to us. Because on a certain level, it's not wrong. As Swami Kriyananda said to me once, God doesn't want you to be unhappy. And then he added, that's your idea. That's not his idea. Misery is no more pleasing to God than worldly exaltation. What's pleasing to God is that we love him. And in the Bhagavad Gita, that last verse that Ramurti read, give your heart to me, adore me, make me the center of your reality. And what is that me? It's personified in Jesus. But it is the consciousness that comes through him. And what is that consciousness? Perfect love, perfect self-sacrifice, perfect disinterest in his own reality, utter commitment to the upliftment of all of us. It's interesting, Swami's letter, Swamiji is 87, he'll be 87 very soon. His body is so frail and tired, and the fact that his heart still beats and he still breathes is entirely and only the grace of God and Guru. There's no physical reason why that body should still be functioning, but it isn't time for him to exit yet from this world. But his spirit is gone from ordinary human life, and he shocks us in his letter. We want him to say, oh, what a great experience it's been. We had some really good times, didn't we? That's what you want. You want to be affirmed. The ego wants to be affirmed in its little pleasures. But the masters don't come to change the flavor of the mess of pottage. They come to wake us up and say, yes, as Swami writes, I love you. I think only now of the infinite light, but I'm held by the fact that I want you all to come with me. In the Festival of Light every week it says, greater can no love be than this. We're speaking of the masters. from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God. We can't even imagine that. Infinite joy, freedom in God, willingly to embrace limitation, pain, and suffering for the salvation of mankind. Such ever has been the sacrifice of the great masters for this world. We don't think of it as a sacrifice to live here. We're having a fairly good time most of the time, except when we're not, and then we just imagine that in just a little short period of time, God's going to fix that for me. And in a little short period of time, God is going to fix that for us. But He's going to take us to a place that is enjoyable beyond imagination of expectancy, that makes this little world that we live in, makes Swami right. I don't even have any pleasant memories. I don't look back on it with longing. I think only of the infinite. So Jesus lives this life with His disciples, and you must be sure they had so much joy together. You can be certain of that. That is what a master brings. He brings into this reality that we live that spark of pure joy. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt, Master writes. For joy I live. And where is the source of that joy? Well, Jesus comes in on Palm Sunday, and they think the source of the joy is that now He will be powerful in this world. We are going to change the flavor of this mess of pottage. He's going to be in charge, and we're going to be with Him. And yeah, it would be a lot more fun. Swami Kriyananda once described to me the highest ages on this planet is, he said, it's just the same really, as he put it. It's not really more satisfying. It's still the material plane. And then he said, but people like us are in charge. So it is more pleasant. I said, so the whole world is like Ananda. Yes, he said, the whole world is like Ananda. And that's certainly more pleasant than, with all due respect, what's going on now with the people who are in charge. And the flavor of the mess of pottage is really not, it's pretty bitter right now. You know, with just the self-interest and so on like that. But then what Jesus came and He shocked, and even has to be said, He terrified His disciples. Even Peter, who was so loyal to Jesus and had so much commitment to Him and in the end, lived out that loyalty. Even he, in the face of Jesus being arrested, and Jesus is being taken prisoner by the powerful forces that have been opposing Him all along. Jesus has been fighting these forces all the way through, but Jesus always came out on top. And then all of a sudden, Jesus is just underneath their power. And they grab Him physically, and they bind Him, and they take Him, into their council rooms. And when that first happens, Peter picks up a sword. He's not going to let this happen. He has courage. He's not afraid. But his master stops him. And in fact, Peter cuts off the ear of one of the people who's taking Jesus away, and Jesus stops Peter and tells him to put his sword away, and then picks up the ear and puts it back on the man. I mean, these things really happened. So you're standing there, and you see the one you love the most in the world, to whom you owe everything, is being seized by evil people. Naturally, Peter put himself on the line. He stood there. He drew his weapon. He was willing to do what was needed. But his master said, no, that response of yours is not the right response. This is what has to happen. How many times in our lives, isn't that exactly how it acts itself out? Something comes and we think we're supposed to pick up our sword and do this. But in one way or another, the power of God says, no, not at all. Something completely different than you expect. Something completely different than your idea of what it's supposed to be. So Jesus is taken away, and then there he's held by the high priests, and they're questioning him, and they've begun to abuse him, humiliate him, and in every way treat him the exact opposite of what happened a week before. Now Peter has snuck in And he's sort of with the servants, and he's sort of just pretending to be just anybody there, but he's listening and trying to see what's happening. He had that much courage. But then 3 times, just as Jesus had predicted in advance, when people said to Peter, don't I recognize you? Didn't I see you with that man? Aren't you one of his followers? The one who's being tried and being held there? Weren't you with him before? No, Peter says, no, not me. You made a mistake there. You know? Now, all of these stories are given to us so that we see how the real cycle takes place. Determination, courage, willing to risk, and then fear comes in. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I can't. It's all going differently than I expected. What should I really be doing? 3 times Peter denies Jesus, and then Jesus had told him in advance this would happen. Because Peter had asserted to Jesus when Jesus said he was going to a place where Peter couldn't go. I will go with you, Peter said. He was always bold. Jesus says, 3 times before the morning comes, Jesus tells Peter, you will say you don't even know me. I'm sure Jesus said that to him so that when it happened, Peter would be able to remember that even in that moment, Jesus loved him, knew it was coming. And Peter redeemed himself afterwards and became strong. And then after Jesus resurrected, 3 times Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? 3 times Peter said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. It's just perfect balance, the way the divine works for us. And these stories are given so that we know. So Jesus' life ends suddenly, unexpectedly, in the most terrifying possible way for the disciples. Just everything they didn't want. Does this sound like a story that any of us have ever lived through? Everything we didn't want, either by our own actions, like Peter, showing courage and then showing so much cowardice, and then yes, Jesus came back, but then Jesus dies. And Peter has no way, he thinks, of ever redeeming this. But then, it is not the end of the story, because enjoyable beyond imagination of expectancy. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. All of this is the true story. And even though we would want the script to be written differently, we want it to be easier, and above all, we want it to be different. We want it to be more like what I already know. But it simply isn't. Because when we live in a small room, in a small box with the windows closed, and claim that this is the whole world, and the power of the whole world is around us, how is God helping us by saying, oh, well, you're comfortable in there, you can just stand there forever? There's a ridiculous scene in the movie The Mouse That Roared, of all things, which is a very old movie, where these people are, without even going to the whole story, but the soldiers are taken prisoner by accident, and they're treated like honored guests, and they're given the run of the palace and the dancing girls and all this wonderful food. And this one curmudgeon of an officer insists that he be treated according to the Geneva Convention. He wants a cell of a certain size, he wants a tin plate, he wants a spoon. So they think, okay, if that's what you want, you know. So he's proudly sitting in this little cell with his tin plate and his tin spoon, and he thinks he's really gotten his rights. And all the other soldiers are out, you know, in this beautiful palace with the dancing girls, but he's gotten what he thinks is the right thing. So God is puzzled sometimes as to what to do with us. You know? Well, if that's what you want, if you want to just be famous, okay, you can be famous. If you want to be successful, and if you want to flap your wings and show how strong you are and feel, you know, what a mensch, right? God says, fine. It's not a bad thing. It's just not what I really have to give you. And when Jesus comes triumphantly on Palm Sunday and they think that's what he has to give, and then he dies in such a ignominious way, and they think, what was this all about? But it's not the end of the story. The end of the story is the disciples were gathered in the room, and the door was locked for fear that those who had arrested Jesus were also going to come to arrest them. And suddenly, there he is in the midst of them. He did not walk through the locked door. He did not unlock the door. There he is in the midst of them. And that even in itself, you see, is the story of Easter, because here he is in the middle of our being. Here he is in the middle of our heart, offering us through the example of his life and the proof of his triumph over everything that we would not want to have. Peace be unto you, he said. And it was, as they write, it was a flesh and blood manifestation. He looked at this death, suffering, humiliation, disappointment, everything that we think is the beginning and the middle and the end of it all. And he just walked through it, walked out of the other side, and walked back into the room, just as he was. And he didn't appear just once, but he appeared many times over the course of several weeks that came. And in many of the stories of Jesus being there, he's frying fish or sharing food, or in other ways inviting the disciples to see that he's unchanged, that what they perceived in him, which was not only him, but their own reality, nothing, not suffering, not death, not time, not space, nothing is greater than that, and nothing can take it away from us. Rise, O my soul, in freedom. Rise, O my soul, in freedom. Nothing to fear anymore. Mary Magdalene comes to that tomb and Jesus isn't even in there. And at first she simply doesn't know what to do. And then, not long after, she sees him. Oh, there he is. Oh, there he is. And not only is she reunited with the one she loves most in the world, but the whole apparent nightmare of suffering was nothing. Deep and important lessons for us. She remained loyal. She feared, she wondered, she questioned, but she never doubted. Peter turned away in fright, but he came back in courage. There he was in the midst of them. Thomas, I won't believe it till I see it. So Jesus comes and says, here I am. And Thomas had declared, until I see his wounds, till I put my hand into his side. I mean, it's a extreme story. But even then, Jesus said, all right. Swamiji writes to us, I love you. He said, forgive me. I don't really love all of your desires and your ego wants and your dislikes. In other words, I don't have a lot of sympathy for all of the things that you all are clinging to. But what I love is the light within you, and what I am determined is to take you with me into the infinite. That's a true friend. It's not a true friend, and we're not being true friends to ourselves when we say, yes, but also this, yes, but also this, yes, but also this. We're like little children, have to have their 16 little stuffies, a certain arrangement before they'll go to sleep at night. Mommy puts them all there, like that. I remember my little pink teddy bear with the plastic nose. I can still sort of feel the little pink teddy bear with the plastic nose, having to hold that little thing. Your mother says, there. But our comfort doesn't come from those 16 little stuffies that we've arranged on our bed. Our comfort comes from our relationship with God. And so Jesus lives. He suffers the most terrible death we can imagine. He walks right out of that fire. And there he is in the midst of us. And the first song that we sing, children of God, your time of trial is ended. Your tears will rise like sun to the dew, like the dew rise to the sun. The ground is wet, the sun comes, it disappears, doesn't it? It awaits but our sight. That's how the song is written. Lifting our eyes to the spiritual eye, seeing what God has given us, and then having the courage to receive it.